All right, can you tell me, do you have the recording symbol up?
Yes, recording started.
Okay, great. All right, so we are recording. Good morning. This is day 9, Tuesday, the 24th of January. We're going to do, well, a few different things today. First, we're going to finish this website we started yesterday. And to give you a little preview, for lack of better words, we are going to take this right now, which is kind of the way it looks right now. All right, and we're going to convert it into this. Okay, I did change it around a little bit, just so you know, and we're going to go through all of that stuff. And again, when we get finished today, I will take everything that I've done and put it out on the associated GitHub repository. All right,
Professor, you're not screen sharing yet.
appreciate that. Okay.
Okay.
All right, so one more time. We are going to take what we did yesterday, which kind of looked like this. Now, I did send you a file this morning, just right before class, that had this in there. I just grabbed this from online and created that for my logo. Okay, but we want to take this that we were working on yesterday, it pretty much looked like this, and we want to convert it over to this. And again, it's not perfect. There are things about it that I would change, but I just didn't have the time to change them, but it doesn't look terrible. And it'll also get us into talking about the subject of chapter 8, which is responsive web design. So you'll notice that when I make this small enough, you can kind of see what happens here. It is responsive. By no means is it perfect. Like I said, there's a lot of work I could do on this. I just don't have the time right now. All right, but that's what we're going to be working on then today. So to start with, I'm going to go back and show you the tweaks, so to speak, that I made in the HTML file. Now, a couple people had emailed me yesterday, and I want to say this again, and that is, if it was too hard to follow me yesterday, all right, because I'm, in a way at least, probably I was a little all over the place, but if that's the case, then just watch, all right, and basically just follow along that way, because again, you will have the code when we get all done. So let me open this up in code, Visual Studio Code, that is. All right, so here's where we are. Okay, so again, I'm going to be making some changes in here as we go. One thing I don't think I did yesterday, but I added that, was that language equals English. All right, and again, we talked about this earlier, but the reason for doing that is because we want to make sure that when we get done today and we go in, and I haven't even tried to validate this document yet, but we're going to try to validate it, and then hopefully it'll validate cleanly. And if it doesn't, it won't be hard to make some changes so that it does validate. All right. Okay. So after that, we've got our head section. You already heard this before. In our head section, we're basically putting the stuff in there that is not going to be showing. All right. Now, a couple things. First of all, in here, I really should have a little bit more than I do have. There's no meta tags in there. All right. That wasn't the idea behind this. What I wanted to show you here was a fairly simplistic website and how we could take that fairly simplistic website and make it responsive. Now, the reason I'm bringing this up is those meta tags, especially the one that goes over viewport and the like, that really should have been in there, because it does help, and it will help in a few weeks when we get out of this book and before we transition over to JavaScript, when we spend some time talking about Bootstrap. All right. So again, then taking it from the top. So we've got our title in here. We've got our links. I'm just linking. I went over to that normalize.css file that was shown in our textbook. I copied it. I copied it into our CSS folder. So there's normalize and there's styles. All right. In addition, again, that in the image, that's the logo that I gave you before. So that's just this. All right. Now, you won't have to put that in, but it'll probably help if you take that folder that I sent this morning and unzip it and basically work along with what I'm doing. All right. It very well could end up helping your understanding of what we're doing here. All right, good. All right, thank you for letting them in, or else you've just got in naturally. I don't know. So that's the head. So we're adding normalize. We're adding our own style sheet. I mentioned yesterday that the order in which you add these two things does matter. If we flip them, this probably would end up looking a lot different when we get done. All right. And then finally, this is how we add our JavaScript file. And we're going to look at that. Even though we did yesterday, we're going to look at that again today. If the JavaScript file doesn't totally make sense to you right now, please don't let that bother you. All right. When we get to the end of this book, I believe it's the last chapter in this book, or darn close to the last chapter, they have kind of an intro to JavaScript. So we'll spend an entire period where I will go back and forth between the book where I'll be lecturing and then just some examples to show you what JavaScript is like. All right. So that's how you add it. We'll talk about the defer that's in here and a lot of other stuff when we get to that point. So for right now, please don't worry about it. All right. Then we've got our body section. And as you've already heard, the body section is where all the stuff that gets shown on the page is shown. So let me do a view here and let me word wrap for that line right here. So that did wrap. All right. So we're in here. So you can now see on the screen the entire header section in here. So you'll notice that we've got for header, we've got a class that's called header. It sure doesn't make, it doesn't hurt to call it the same name as the tag. It doesn't hurt anything. Most of the time, what people end up doing when they are creating things like this is called camel case. And I know many of you heard this last semester, but it's when you run words together, you literally run them together. The first word is all lowercase, but then the first letter of every word that follows is uppercase. All right, so typically that's how you do it. We could put an underscore, we could put main underscore header and make it all lowercase. Some people prefer it that way. In the end, it really and truly doesn't matter that much. But the point is that if you go in and you do this long enough, you get exposed to different styles, is what I'm trying to tell you. All right. Okay. So then we've got our div for our main header, and then I put everything in here in a div as well. Why did I do that? Because what I want to do is I want to make sure that eventually that logo and our menu are on the same line. All right. And what would happen otherwise is this tag right here. All right, when we go through and do this, the nav and the UL is known as a block level element. So it'll automatically start on a new line. That's what it does by default. The image, this does not start on a new line. And this is good because it allows me to explain something to you that we may or may not have talked about before. An image tag is an example of what's referred to as an inline element. In other words, an image doesn't automatically appear on a new line. You can put an image in the middle of text. You can put an image in the middle of just about anything. All right. So it's called an inline image or an inline element because it doesn't start on a new line. On the other hand, the UL that you see right here, that is referred to as a block level element. All right. And the idea is by default, you've seen this already. Each one of these things is going to appear on its own line. Well, eventually we're going to have to tell this menu that we've got right here, we want you to act as though you're an inline element. And we'll do that in just a little bit. All right. So in this div right here, what you see is we've got our image, and that's that paw and that scissors, etc., that I showed you before. Remember, I'm trying to follow good practices here. So not only do I have a source tag, which of course would be mandatory, but I also have an alt tag for alternative text. Now, logo might not be the greatest thing in the world to put in there, but even somebody with a screen reader, should you know, they're probably could care less if they're blind or legally blind. You know, they probably could care less what the logo looks like anyway. All right. Plus, I'm giving that a class. Could have been an ID because there's only one logo in here, but I gave it a class so that later we will be able to, if we so desire, we will be able to add some CSS here. All right. Then we've got our nav, and inside of our nav, we've got a class, as you can see, that's called menu bar. All right. Really, that's what a navigation area typically is. Okay. Now, I didn't have to give that a name, but it's possible if you have a site, it is actually possible that you could have more than one navigation area. And since this is the main menu bar, I called it menu bar. Again, we didn't have to do that. All right. Now, the next thing that's in here, hopefully you remember this because we've talked about this already. What this is going to allow us to do, and it's not at all perfect. I'd have to, again, do some tweaking on this. But if you look, let me jump back here. All right. Notice if I click about where it goes. A little, I'd have to move it around a little, but it pretty much goes to the about. Gallery, there's our gallery. Services, there's our services. And contact, that one actually came out pretty well. And home, come on, jumps us back up to the top. So it is a way for us to move around in here. Now, rather than having 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different pages, we've got everything in here on the same page. So what this is allowing us to do in here with what I'm just explaining is by putting that pound home, this is, you know, these right here are tags. All right. But we're telling it where to jump to, for lack of better words. All right. So it'll jump to those particular sections. And again, you can see that our menu bar is inside of an unordered list. Now, again, it's because of some of the settings I have in here, but I would have done it like this. Is to me, that shows a little bit more of exactly what's going on. All right. The problem is when I save, because of some of the settings that I have on the editor, it automatically reformats it for me. All right. But my question is, anybody who's watching live right now, any questions on anything that's in there in the header section? Is there anything in there that does not make sense before we go on? All right. Then I
So
am going to
are
go
we
ahead.
gonna like change this menu bar later? Because mine just still isn't working, you know?
No, if yours doesn't work, if yours looks like this,
Yes, yeah.
in fact, this one, if it looks like
Yes.
this, that's to be expected.
Okay, okay.
Yeah. It's the CSS that we're going to put into it in just a little bit. That's what's going to change it.
Right, right.
All right.
Thanks.
Okay. All right. So when we jump ahead, then the next thing, typically, not always, but kind of a unwritten standard in here, just so you know, kind of an unwritten standard is whatever comes in, you know, basically right under your nav bar, which for us is going to be this thing that's in here. That's called a hero section. I don't know how it got its name. It very well might have a story. I've never investigated it, but typically that's referred to, whatever comes right underneath your nav bar is typically called a hero section. So our hero section is actually quite small. It's right here. All right, so you can see I gave it there that ID equals home. So where it says ID equals home, that is being used here with the pound home. Remember, pound sign means ID. All right. So we are setting up our class to be hero. All right. And then inside of there, we've got an H1 tag. And again, that's before and after dog groomers. That's the H1. Then the H2 is actually explaining what the acronym means. Then after that, we've just got a paragraph. All right. Did I need that div there? No. Inside for the paragraph. Did we need this? No. All right. I just set it up that way. What ends up typically happening is you end up using a lot of divs when you are creating a site like this. Not only that, and you're going to see this both, not in this particular example, but you'll see it in later examples, and you'll see it when we get to JavaScript. If I wanted to come in here, let's just say I wanted to use the word all, and I wanted to take that and I wanted to make sure that that particular word, for example, was bolded or made bigger or whatever. But you'll notice it's just a word that I want to use. So rather than using a div, if I want to do something inside of a div or inside of something else, I use what's called a span. We will talk about that at a later time, but I just wanted you to hear that. Also, from what I mentioned to you before, the div, the H1, the H2, and the P tag, every one of those is a block level element. So by default, they're all going to start on a new line. They're all going to take up as much of the line as they possibly can. And they all would just about always will have a blank line after them. All right. As opposed to, again, an inline element. So these are all block level elements right here. All right. So any question or anything on that home section that's in there that doesn't make sense? Again, I realize there's not much stuff in there, all right, but hopefully just taking a quick look at it, it makes, again, at least a little bit of sense. All right, then I'm going to jump down into the next section. All right, you'll notice in here, I guess I broke my protocol a little bit. I've got in here div class equals section. I could have just put section in there. There's so many ways that this could be done. All right, I based this off of an older thing that I'd worked on a long time ago. But this is the next part. It's the about section, and if you look, it starts here, and it's pretty long. It goes all the way to here. So why is that so long? Well, one of the reasons that it is it's got some paragraphs in here. And again, going back to here, that's the about. It's these two paragraphs. But rather than have them just show there on there as one big humongous line, I formatted them so that they could be read. All right. So it's not that there's really that much in there. And again, to do that, I think I mentioned this before. I went out to, I think it's doggoipsum.com. And in there, they've got, if you look, you know, they've got a lot of words that sounded kind of like dogs. All right. We didn't have to do that. We could have just gone out to lipsum.org, etc., and put in anything in there we wanted. All right. So the ID for this is about. All right. That ID again that says about, that's the one that again goes to right here. All right. So this is a way again for us to jump around, so to speak, in our document. All right. And then we've got another div in there, and it's got a class called container. So virtually everything that we're doing is inside of this container class right here. Underneath that, we've got an H2 tag, and that H2 tag just says about. All right. And then you'll notice, and again, ours doesn't show it yet, but we've got their div class equal col space col2. I want you to understand something here. These are two different classes. I don't know why there's a space there. It doesn't matter one way or the other. But we are telling it to apply here the col class and the col2 class. So you can apply multiple different classes to the same part of a document. You just separate them with one or more blank spaces. Kind of by protocol, it's just by a single blank space. So if I had another class in here and that I wanted to make everything turn purple, I could come in here and type in purple as an example. All right, so I can have as many of these as I want to or need to have. All right, then we have another two more divs, one that's called box, and we'll see this later, and one that's called content. In the content, this is the first paragraph, so you can see how long that was. All right, then we do the same thing all over again. Now, the reason that this is going to be so important here is we're hardly going to put any CSS in for col 2, just a single line. And in that single line, what we're going to do is we're going to tell the system that each one of those columns in col 2 should take up 50% of the screen. So again, I know I've shown you this already, but let's just jump back to it for a second. So when we go back and look at this, when you go back and look at this, it'll change to this. All right, which looks a lot nicer. And we'll put some extra stuff in there. You can see we made the first letter in each paragraph bigger. There's the box that we talked about. So we got the box around there, etc. One thing to notice on here, just so you know, that typically when you put in paragraphs on a web page like this, you typically don't use fully justified. All right, where everything would line up real pretty, because it ends up wasting a lot of white space doing that. It's not that you can't do it. I mean, if you're working for someone and they tell you they want you to do that, well, heck, you do it, right? But it's typically just not done. All right. So here's our second paragraph then. And as you can see, that pulls us down to about line 75. All right. Now here I've got div class equal section because I started to go back and fix this and then I didn't. So I could have just made, there's a lot of different stuff we could do in here to fix this. All right. So in here, this is where we're going to have the pictures of our dogs. And which ones are these? I want to make sure you understand exactly what I'm talking about here. All right. So I'm going to jump back to here. That's these 4 pictures right here. All right. And I looked at this morning and I thought I really should have gone in here and at least bolded these, probably made them bigger, etc. You could do that on your own if you wanted. One of the reasons I'm giving you this is I figured it would be a good tool. I would recommend you do this if you get the time, and that is make a copy of the entire repo and then start going through and make changes all over the place. Change the HTML, change the CSS just to see what happens. All right. You're going to learn a lot more from that than sitting there and listening to me talk. All right. So again, we want that, but right now it's going to just look like this. All right. Not much. But when we put our col 4 in there, what that is going to say is we basically want each one of these columns to take 25% of the screen. All right. And you can see we've got a div in here and then another div because we want to make sure that both of these, all right, are grouped together because this is what we're calling a card. And if you say, well, why did you use the word card? The word card you're going to see when we get to the bootstrap portion of the class. All right. And I tried to, kind of introduce you to some verbiage that we will be talking about later on in the semester. And you can see all of these are the same. So here's the first image. Here's the second image. Here's the third image. Here's the fourth image. All right. Now, one thing about this, and you don't have to do this, but you'll notice inside of images, I've got gallery, which has got 9 images, the intro, which has got 4 images, and the logo, which just has our 1 image. I did not have to break those up and put them into 3 different folders. But the reason that I did that was, 14 images is already getting fairly big. It's much easier, in my opinion, when you're putting that stuff in here to put them into folders. So there's my intro stuff. Up on top, I had the logo stuff. A little later, we'll have our gallery stuff, etc. I think it's easier to do it that way. I would never take off if you were to create a site and, for example, create this site and you put all 14 of them right under images. That's your call. I don't give you extra credit for doing that. I don't take away for you not doing it. All right. Then next we've got our gallery. And in our gallery here, again, you've seen this already, but that's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 different pictures. All right. But we want that eventually to look like this. And here there are 3 across. You can see that by default, it's got pretty much an even. This is called typically the gutter area. So the gutter here and the gutter here match. All right, I'm looking here and it looks like over here I should have pushed it over further. All right, and I didn't. Okay, but you'll notice again when we go and take this and we make it smaller, now each one will be on its own, in its own column. All right. And again, that's what we're talking about when we want to make it responsive. So you'll notice again in here, blank line doesn't hurt anything, but I really don't need it. All right, everything's in a container and all of these look the same. All right, they all look like this. Really, the only thing that's different in each one of these is the number that's in there for the image. So we've got 9 images. They're all with column and column 3. All right. And that's pretty much what we have in there. Okay. Then next, I don't know how this got formatted like this, but it did. All right. We've got our services area, and our services area, let's take a quick look at that. That's going to look like this. And hopefully you can tell by looking at it, this we actually centered. How do I know that? We'll take a look at the last line in here. We could just as easily have left justified it or right justified it or fully justified it. You probably wouldn't typically do this, but I just wanted to show you that indeed you could. All right. So if we look at that, again, it's 2 paragraphs. So here's our first paragraph. And here's our second paragraph. All right. Again, not a whole heck of a lot to say or even show you with that. Then finally at the bottom, because we're getting towards the bottom, here we have our form. Now that form is not going to look very good right now. Okay, and you've already seen this. So our form will originally look like this. That doesn't look very nice. All right, but after we format it, it'll look like this, which looks a lot nicer. Okay, now we will, you were able to put stuff in here, so I can put my name in here. I can put my email in here, etc. I can put a message in here. All right, and I can click submit. Now, what's going to happen here, since I put a mail to in, it's actually going to go out and attempt to use Outlook to actually go and send this. All right. And we'll get into that, I think, in the next chapter a little bit more. All right. But again, originally it'll look bad. And after we add some CSS, it'll look much nicer. But let's talk about what's in there. You're not going to probably remember this stuff. All right. Again, we've got a whole chapter on forms that we'll discuss later. All right. But we're coming in here. We've got a H2 that says contact. Then notice col 1. What does that mean? That means it's going to take up 100%. All right. We've got a div that says main form. And what does this do? All right. Couple things. First of all, notice the action is mailed to, and it says test@gmail.com. I could put my own email in there if I wanted to, jpscott@rankin.edu, etc. All right, it's attempting to post. So it is going to be attempting to send this. And it's letting us know, whoops, where it says ENC, I think that's encryption type. It's just plain text in there. So in other words, there's no text in here where I'm putting in HTML tags. And what I mean is in the actual, yes, they are HTML tags, but it's not expecting the input that I put in to be HTML tags. All right. And let's break this up. We talked about this a little bit before, but I want to make sure you've got an idea of what's going on in here. All right. So this is the thing for the name. All right. So notice it says 4 equals username. I think before we just call the name, it doesn't matter. And we've got an ID and we've got a name. We talked about this a little bit before. We will be using that ID because that ID, again, is something that I could conceivably add some CSS to. All right, so we will use that ID here. We will use that ID when we get to the JavaScript portion of the class. We will not use the name property in here at all this semester. So the question is, why did you show it to us then? Because when you take the AWD1111 class, which is database-driven web development 1, that class basically doesn't really use the ID much, but virtually exclusively uses the name. So you're used to seeing them both, is what I'm saying. All right. There's also a placeholder in there that says your name. And you may or may not have noticed that, but that's this. All right. So in other words, when I remove this, when I remove all that, it says your name. That's the placeholder. So there's a placeholder for the name. There's a placeholder for the email. All right. We could have put one in for the message, but we didn't. So where it says your name, when you click in here and start typing, immediately that gray text goes away. It's only when it's totally empty. So even if I hit the space bar, which is what I just did, it goes away. It's only when it's totally empty, and that's called a placeholder, hopefully at least, for obvious reasons. We can put anything we want to put in there. All right, then we've got a similar one for the email. Again, notice when we did the name, we said the type equal text, which means you can put in virtually anything. Here we said the type equals email. You saw this a little bit yesterday. All right. And when we looked at that yesterday, I can run it again if we need to. But if I put in an invalid email address in there, it'll give me an error. All right. And this was that text area. Now, yesterday I went in and manually sized it. So I manually came in there and put in the columns and the rows. All right. We're going to use a little more CSS on that today. All right. And then finally, we've got input type equals submit, value equals submit, class equals BTN for button. What does that mean? That means that if we want to be able to format this button, it now has a class, so we'll be able to add that. And if you come in and you take a look at the button, hopefully you can tell the button is not square. By default, it is square. So what we're going to be able to do is we're going to be able to apply that border radius property to the button. And then once we do, it'll look a little, well, we'll say a little nicer. How's that? And again, this isn't really colorful. The background's kind of a grayish. We got a white and black in here all over the place. So you could take this, you could make this a different color, etc. There's a lot of different stuff that could be done to this to pretty this up. All right, then finally, we've got that simple footer created by, you could put your own name in there, ampersand copy for the copyright symbol, all rights reserved. And then we've got this thing where it says ID equal watch. I showed you this yesterday, but that's where we're adding the date and the time. All right. Now, the way that I want to go through this is I want to start adding CSS in here. So I'm going to start with a brand new file. All right. And I'm going to come in and add the CSS. We'll add some CSS, and then we'll go and take a look at what it did. Then we'll add some more CSS and take a look at what that did. I tried to put this in the right order. Knowing me, I probably didn't succeed totally. But see things as we start putting in the CSS. So before we do that, all right, I'm going to do a file save all on here. But does anybody have any questions on anything that's in the HTML here? Anything that I might have gone through too quickly or that just doesn't make sense? All right. So let's come in here and you'll look. I do have the finished product in here. I'm not going to lie to you, but I called it Styles 2. I don't want you to change yours. I'm going to come in here and I'm going to right mouse click and do new file. And I'm going to put in here styles.css. That file that I'm about to add is this file that's right here in my HTML. So it's under the CSS folder and it's called styles.css. I'm going to hit enter and here we go. All right, again, as we're doing this, there are probably going to come a time where something in here doesn't make sense to you. What do I mean? Well, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to put asterisk, which is our universal selector, and we're going to put box sizing, border box. All right. Now, I don't know about you, but the first time I saw that, I was very confused. So what did I do? All right, you can probably already guess, but I went out and I said W3 schools, and then I put that in there. Box sizing, border box. All right, so box sizing, boom, there you go. Okay, and what is it showing in here? Okay, it says it shows two elements specified with the same width and height. Well, that doesn't look like it's the same thing. It doesn't look like it's the same width and the same height. All right, it says they end up with different sizes because we've got padding in here and we don't in the other one. So it says the problem is your screen size, regardless of what type of screen you're using, is only so big. All right, and this right here, of course, is going to be smaller than this right here. Because when you are figuring out how much space something is going to take up, you not only have to worry about the content, but as we've talked about over the last few days, remember that what surrounds the content is the padding. What surrounds the padding is the border. What surrounds the border is the margin. So you have to take all of those things into account. And what can happen is when you put in a lot of padding and a lot of margin, it can do the way that basically what you're trying to work with looks. And they're showing you that in here. So it says here, box sizing solves the problem. Notice it allows us to include padding and border in an element's total width and height. All right. So as it says there, if you put box sizing in their border box, all right, padding and border are included in the width and the height. That may make very little sense to you right now. All right. But what they're saying is when we look here, you'll notice that we've got 300, 100, 300, 100, but this has 50 pixels of padding and this one does not. Other than that, they look the same. All right. Now, when you come in here and you take a look, they're basically set up to take the same amount of space. So what box sizing, setting at the border box does is it makes it easier when the system is trying to calculate how much space to put aside using margin, padding, and content. All right. And it'll basically do a lot more. It'll do the internal calculations for you. Let's just put it like that for now. All right. So that was the first thing that we added. And I will tell you that if we come back in here now after adding that and look at it, it's not going to look any different. Not a lick. All right. It's not going to look any different yet. All right. But I'm going to do a file save anyway. And now I'm going to come in and, in fact, I'm going to put a comment at the top. And I'm going to put here global settings. Do you have to do that? No. And then underneath here, I'm going to put in navbar settings. What I like to do, and not everybody agrees with this, but what I like to do is kind of work my way down. All right. In fact, the way that I'm showing you, the way that we're creating this particular example isn't the way I typically do it. I like to go and write some HTML, then write some associated CSS, then write some more HTML, then write some more associated CSS. I like doing it that way. All right. I decided to do it this way because I figured since this was our first jump into doing this, it would make sense that I could put in all the HTML for the site and explain it as we were going along, then do the same thing with the CSS. But some people do it one way, some people do it the other way. All right. Typically, there's not that this is funny because it's not, but there aren't any web design police that are going to make sure you do it one way or the other. You do it the way you're more comfortable with. That's all. All right. So the first thing I want to do is I want to do a nav UL. So I want to come in here and be able to change the unordered list. List, style, none. Now that should make sense to all of you. Okay, and what that's going to do is it's going to remove the circles or the disk that's at the beginning. And I want to make sure there's no margin. And I want to make sure there's no padding. Why? Because I'm about to put stuff in here myself. So with what we've done so far, I'm going to save this. And then I'm going to go back and take a look at our site. All right. And I don't want that one. Let's see, what's the problem here? All right. Save all. Let's go back to here and we'll bring it up in live server. There we go. All right. All you can see right now, the only thing that's happened here is it's pushed it all the way over because that's the margin 0, padding 0, and it got rid of those little disks that's at the start. So when you say nav UL, that's all the stuff, so to speak, that's all the stuff, all right, that is only affecting the unordered list. And we're going to work our way down now. What do I mean? It's easiest to show you. So I'll add some stuff and then we'll go back and take a look again. All right. So again, these are nav bar settings. That's the unordered list itself. Then I'm going to say nav UL LI. These will be the list items. I'm going to say float, left, position, relative. All right. Now, again, there aren't going to be all that many changes that you're going to see when I do that. And now that I think about it, I really should have done the logo first. All right. And the logo doesn't have much in it. All right. The logo much in it. So let's go and do the logo. All right. So dot logo, remember I gave it a class of logo. And I'm going to say, I'm going to float it to the left. All right. I'm going to have the color of the logo. All right. Any text that's in there. In fact, it's a picture, so this really doesn't even matter. But I'm going to put in here white. Originally, I had text in there, if you remember. Okay, we had the word logo in there. And I'm going to say margin left 10 pixels. Okay, let's take a look at what that did. So file save. And let's go back. Should be able to jump back into here now. Okay, looks pretty terrible. It's going to be fixed. But notice one of the things that happened here. When we did this, this is pushed over and it's got its 10 pixels. Now this is over here. It's not perfect. And wow, why is that in here? You'll have to just bear with me for a minute. All right. Okay. So we came in there. In fact, we also have a menu bar, don't we? I mean, this whole thing, the logo, etc., that's all in a menu bar. So there's our logo. But before we do our nav bar, let's just put in here menu bar. Just going to put in one thing, and that's going to be float right. Whoops. That. Try that again. I'm partially there. And that is dot menu bar. Float right. Just like that. All right. I believe I'm a strong proponent of write a little bit, take a look at what you've done. All right, there we go. So now notice that we still have that heading here. Don't worry about that. All right, but we now have our logo, and way to the right, all right, we have this. Now it's all run together because there's more stuff that we have to do with this. All right, but we have gone in, we've removed the dots, we removed the margin, we removed the padding, and that's why it's all pushed together. All right, and we are setting up basically its positioning right now. Okay, so let's jump back into here again. And now let's pretty it up. So now we're going to say nav, ULLIA. These are going to be the actual menu items themselves. Let's add some padding. All right, text decoration, none. We don't want those underlines. Let's make the color on these white. Let's give them a different font size. And let's float them to the right. All right, there's only one more thing that we're going to want to do in here with these menu items that we'll do in just a moment. All right, so let's look at what that did. And holy moly, it totally removed it. That's interesting because I'm working off my other one, but we'll take a look and we'll see what happens, or if I miss something. Let me go back and take a look. That kind of stuff sometimes happens. All right, so let's see. I'm going to go back just from it right from the beginning here. UL, list style none, margin 0, padding 0, nav ULLI, float left, position relative, that's all good. Nav ULLIA, that actually looks correct. There's only one more thing that we want to do in here, and that is we want to set up a hover so that when we actually go in and put our mouse over one of these items, we want the color of it to change. All right, so we'll set the background color. We'll set that to white. And I actually know what the problem is, but we'll fix that in a moment. And the color will be black. And the float will be to the right. Okay, the reason that it's not showing right now, and maybe you've already figured this out, is notice the stuff's there, but our background is white. All right, since our background right now is white, it's not showing. All right, so it is there because when we hover over it, it's showing. All right, so how do we change that? Well, one way, and there's different ways of changing it, but for now, because I want to make sure that we can see something here, is I'm going to go back to here, and where we have our global settings, see if this works. I'm going to say background, color. All right, background color, and we'll put in here pound 333. That's too dark. That's even a little dark. That'll work. All right, now I'm looking here, and when I did this before, it says float left. I thought I saw an error in here, but it doesn't look like there's one now. So file, save all. Let's go back again. And now you'll notice we can see them. Now I can change this color. I just wanted you to be able to see that what we have now done, and don't worry about this because this we have not done any formatting with that yet. But what we have on the same line is our logo. And we've got these. Plus, as you can see, when we highlight them, this is the hover effect. All right, so it's doing all that. All right, so what we've done then is we have come in And we have set up a couple things. We set up box sizing, and I probably did a poor job, but our book goes through box sizing much better than I do. All right. Then we talked about, all right, then we came in there and we did the logo. Then we did the menu bar. Then we did the nav bar settings. Then we did the list items, and then we did the actual menu items themselves. Now I could, again, maybe make this even a little bit, that's even lighter. All right, but what's going to happen is sooner or later, it's going to be white. We'll have the same problem that we had before. So let me do a file, save all here, come back. All right. And again, it's already being washed out. You can see because it's so light. We could play with this, do all sorts of different stuff with it, but that's not the goal here. All right. Okay. But we're going to do a couple more things. It's 8:56 and we'll take a break. All right. And if you remember, several of the things that we did back in here, we said class equal container. Several different things we did for container, but we haven't set up the container in our CSS. Let's do that. There's a couple things we want to set up and then we'll take a break. All right. So again, that's all my nav bar, menu nav bar. And then I'm going to come down here and this will be my container settings. All right. So put some padding in here. Min height, this is all stuff that we're going to be talking about. We're going to want to say that at a minimum, this should be 100 pixels high. Our position is going to be relative, which we've talked a little bit about, but we're going to talk about some more when we go back to the book. And remember this, margin 0, which means top and bottom, no margin, and auto, which means left and right, we want to have it centered. All right. So then what about images that we have in here? So container image, we want that to basically be able to reposition it or resize itself. That no matter what size the screen is, we want it to take up 100% of the allotable size. All right, one more thing, and that is our H2 that's in here. We move this up just a little bit. And we're going to do a text align center, which will center that H2 heading will now be centered. We're going to do a text transform to uppercase so that it doesn't matter how we keyed it in, it'll automatically appear in uppercase. And if you say, I don't know what you mean, you will in about a minute. All right, next we'll have a background color. And again, I went simple here. I said black. We could also have gone in and done RGB 0, 0, 0. That would also have made it black, as you can see right there. Or we could have said pound 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. That would make it black. And since this is a repeating pattern, we only need 3 of these. So we could just say 0, 0, 0. I'm just using the verbiage. All right. So I'm going to say black right there. We're going to have our color of our text is going to be white. And we're going to make it pretty big. So the font size will be 3 rems. All right. So let me do a file, save all, and then let's go back and take a look at the site. And now we've got this, and I guess I didn't do that yet, so that's on me. I'll have to go find that. But it's starting. All right. You see these are bigger. Okay. So it's starting to take shape. Sure is, by no means is it perfect. And I'm going to have to fix this. All right. Oh, because I didn't do the hero section. I should have done that first. Let's do the hero section, then we're going to take a break. All right. So up above my container, I'm going to do the hero because the hero section came before the container section did. All right. So in here, dot hero, I'm going to run over by a minute or two, but we'll get it done. This, I played with color on there, so that's what I did. It's almost black. Right. Couple more things here. For the H1, we'll give that a bigger font size. And that'll be 3M. I'll make it 3M. And then finally, for the H2, now this may look a little funky because I was playing around with M's and Rems, so I may have to change that back from a Rem to an M. If you say I don't know what you mean, no big thing. All right, let's do a file, save all. Now I didn't do my columns yet, which will be done next. Hopefully this is going to look much better than it did. All right. Ooh, well, that's something else. That's in there. This is now looking the way I want it to. That is looking the way I want it to, but it's really funky in here. So we'll have to fix that. And I'll look at that during the break. All right. But you can see, not perfectly, but it's starting to take shape a little bit. All right. It is 9:02. Let's come back, please, at 9:15, and we'll see if we can finish this by around 10 o'clock. Need to refresh my water, so I'll be right back. All right, it is 9:15, so I'm going to start back up. One thing I noticed, if you remember, one of the things that I did earlier was I set this background color. I'm going to get rid of that. And once I do that and save and go back, it's now looking more the way I want it to look. By no means is this perfect. All right. And you can see I've still got this problem. So we'll have to work on that. I'm not worried about that right now. All right. But pretty much this is coming into play. It looks like this is centered. It looks like this is centered. It looks like this is not centered. So I can go back and look at that if I'd like to do so. So what did we have in here? We had the hero H1. And again, I guess that one, let's just center everything. So I'm going to say text align center. And I can do the same thing here. Now this actually brings up a really good point. Right? You'll notice that these two lines have been replicated, and there's nothing wrong with doing that. All right. But I could have really basically combined them. I could have done a dot hero. Well, let's just show it to you. If I wanted to, I could have said dot hero, H1, comma, and I usually put them on another line. You don't have to. Dot hero H2. All right. And then said text align center. So when you've got two things that are when they're sharing properties, all right. So I mean, did that really buy me anything? Technically, it probably added a little more to it. So that's maybe not the best way to do it, but just to show you that. So these should have this font size still and this font size, and they should both be centered. Now, it also should not matter whether I put these above or below these two because they're working with different properties. But if I go back now, oh, something is goofed up because this actually should be centered and it's not. Okay, but we'll look at that in just a bit. All right, I want to keep going on though. Now we're going to make fairly drastic changes right now by doing just a little bit of work. What do I mean by that? Well, hopefully you remember that we've got a col 1, a col 2, a col 3, a col 4, and then one that just is called col. Okay, so we're going to put those in next. So I'm down here. I'll just put column info, whatever you want to put, of course, there. So, and the first thing will be dot col. Okay, and float left, position relative. I got to learn how to spell position relative, and padding of 5 pixels. All right, let me move this down a little bit. And now we're going to actually put in all of these. So what did we have? Well, let's just do them in order. So I'm going to say dot col -1. So this is for a single column. And I'll say width 100%, margin auto, so it should be centered on the page, and text align center. If you remember when we looked at that before, and we looked at that services section, and I showed you how that text in there was actually centered. All right, let's just do the other ones then. So dot col 2. Now we want 2 columns. So here we want to say width 50%. Remember, there's 2 columns, so we want each one of them to take up half. All right. And then we've got a dot col 3. Now this doesn't perfectly add up, so I can say width 33.3%. Oops, 0.3%. We could, sometimes you see people stretch that out and they put that like 33.333333, etc. I think that's a little overkill, but you can do that if you'd like. And dot col 4. And with 4 columns, I want the width to be 25%. All right, I want to do one more thing and then we'll take a look at it. And that is, I want to put in here what we did for the card. Now, it still may look a little bit funky when we do this because there's other things in here like the box and stuff that we haven't done yet. But this card, I want to give it a border, 1 pixel solid, and we'll use that kind of darker color. Oops, 222. And we'll give it that border radius. You can do a lot of stuff with border radius. You can make something, if you make this number in here big enough, where it's actually a circle. So you can turn something that would normally be a square into a circle, for example. All right, so we've made substantial changes right here. Let's do a file, save all, and let's go back in and take a look at the page. All right, so, whoa, okay. Well, some of these colors are wrong. You can see that. They're too dark, so they're basically covering up what we want to have in here. That's okay. We'll get it all fixed. Worst case, if I really screw up something that bad, I'll go to the master one that I've got. Then I'll put that one out there because I know that one works. All right. Okay. This is why, just so you know, this is why, as I mentioned to you before, what I like to do is write a little HTML and then write the CSS that goes with that. Write a little bit more HTML and the CSS that goes with that. Then typically you don't have problems like this. All right. Because you're just working on a single section at a time. All right. Now, you'll notice in here, we do want this to be in a box and it's not right now. So we're going to fix that next. And there were a couple other things we wanted to change in here. We had in box, we had a content class. Go. And we're using a pseudo class right here, starting with colon. And if you remember in here, the first letter, we had it bigger than the other letters. So I'm going to say here, font size 2 rem. Okay. And let's see what that looks like now. Well, again, you can see my box, but somehow I've goofed this up. And that's okay. We're going to get it fixed in just a moment. All right. But you can start to see how everything is laying out. All right. All right. Let's go down to the form as we're working our way down. And we had a class that was called main form. All right. And what we also want to do is we want to take the stuff that's in there. And if you remember, we had what I called a text area, and that's where we could put the message. And we had an input where the type was equal to text. That's where we put the name. And we had another input where the type was equal to email, where, as you guessed, we put the email address. So let's put those in there as well. Um, I hope I'm going to be able to see this. Like I said, there's a problem with one of the colors in here, so we'll fix that. Okay, there's the form. So that's actually not looking too bad right now. Doesn't look exactly the same way that it did before, but that your name, your email, and your message, we technically don't even need those labels. Those are the labels here, here, and here, because we've got in here, we've got the placeholders. So we could put another placeholder in there. I'll just leave it all the way it is. It's totally fine. But I'm just telling you, we could remove that or move that if we wanted to. All right, a couple more things that we want to do in here. We're still working on our form information in here. I want to use an M there, not a rem. Let's talk about that in just a minute. Couple more things here. Let's see. All right, I want to make one more change, and then we'll go back and take a look at it. Anywhere that I've used rems in here, I want to use M's. All right. Now, we haven't really talked much, if at all, about M's and rems, but let's just quickly, okay, I've got it in there, talk about the difference. All right. It has to do, is it grabbing its size based off of where in the website it's based off of? When you do rems, it's doing the size based off of the nearest element. All right, so whatever nearest was defined to it, when you do rems, all right, it does it based, well, one of them, I always get them mixed up. With one of them, it does it based on the nearest element to it, and with the other one, it does it based on the root element at the top. All right, I think I've got just about all of it fixed. Let's just search. I should have done it that way to begin with. No results. Okay, so it found everything. All right, so we've saved. Let's go back and take a look and see if that cleaned it up somewhat. Not too much. Doggone it. I don't know what the heck I did here. Well, that did center that. That's what we wanted to begin with. We do have this. All right. And our about sure looks funky. And our gallery looks funky. What the heck happened over there? This looks wrong. Well, one thing that we have not done yet is we've got almost everything that we did, we put in a section. All right, so the section I never put in there, and I should have put that in there and put it up higher on here. So I'm going to come way up here. I'm going to put in two things. All right, right before the hero section. I'm going to come in here and put in section. Right? And then we're going to put in our main header. Again, I'm not saying this is going to totally fix everything, but it should make it a little better. We don't want that main header to move, so we're going to set its position to fixed. And one last thing that I want to put in here for right now, and that can go at the very bottom. Why? Because it's our footer. Since we have the header near the top, it's a good idea to have the footer down near the bottom. And there's very little here, so let's just quickly put it in. And let's see if I prettied it up at all. Okay, well, it's looking a lot more the way that it should look. All right. Okay, so you can see that now works. And I am jumping. Again, like I said, I have to work on that a little bit, but I am jumping. There's the gallery. There's the services. There's the contact. Well, that was working better before, but it's okay. And there's home. Okay, so we now have that. We have our about section. Looks pretty good. Okay, we have our under our about section, we got our pictures here. Then we've got our photo gallery. You can see I picked these right off the internet. All right. I don't like that it says they're published 2013, but it's okay. There's our services, and you can see that that particular thing that's in there, you can see that that is centered again. You can see our uh, form. There's the button, and we've also formatted our footer. So let's go back because I just wrote a ton of CSS. So let's just take it from the top. All right. The border box, again, I've already tried explaining it to you, maybe not that well. But again, what it's going to do is it's basically going to sit there, and when it's doing its calculations of how much space is needed, rather than looking at the content is one part, the border is one part, the padding is one part, the margin is one part, it brings everything together as a unit and it figures out the sizing, which is much more optimal as far as the system is concerned. All right. So then we did our logo. Let me close this. We did our logo. We told it to float to the left, and you could see that's where it was floated way left. All right. I don't think I need this color that's in here. I had it in here because originally, you may or may not remember, I had just the word logo on there. All right. And now there's a picture instead because I found a picture that I thought was pretty good. All right. Now, then we've got margin left. And the reason for that is if you remember, one of the things that we did earlier was we said we used that normalize, which basically said that our margin and padding was set to 0. This, by setting the margin left to 10 pixels, what you see on here is it pushed it over. That's 10 pixels right there. We could have even done it from the top if we wanted to and done some margin top, etc. So there's a lot of things that could have been done on here, is what I'm telling you. All right. Then we had our menu bar and we said float right. Well, hopefully you can see that since we had the float right, that you can see that it is. This stuff is floated. So that's floating left and that's floating right. All right. All right, let's go continue on here. And then this was the unordered list itself. Again, the first line that you saw there took away all of those discs, the little colored in circles by each one of them. All right. And then we want no margin and no padding because we're going to set it up ourselves. All right. Now, I mean, sometimes I explain stuff and I go back and I occasionally I watch my lectures, but I think, boy, I should have done just a better job of just explaining it from right out of the book. All right. But when we come in here, now we want the list item itself to float to the left. All right. And we're going to have, basically that's going to push everything over a little bit. But I wanted to do this. I think I did this the other day. think we talked a little bit about the position property the other day. But when you look in here, I've set a bunch of stuff in here to relative. All right. And as it says, an element with position relative is position relative to where it would normally be positioned. All right. It's going to adjust it basically. And let's take a look at the example. Okay. So there we have this relative. Well, the easiest way to figure out what relative does is to sit there and grab that line, remove it, and run it again. All right. So you can see by putting that in there, we've got here div relative, but we've got left 30 and border. So that's the border, and there's the left. But by putting in that position relative and running it, you can see what we did. All right. All right. Then we came in here and we've got, again, these are the actual items in there themselves. All right. Now, one thing I did not mention earlier, okay, if you notice in here, I'm using a ton of PX for pixels. And I said that was considered old school and you really shouldn't do that. Well, when you're putting in CSS like this, a lot of people do it like this. All right. And why? Well, if I want 15 pixels in here, you may or may not remember this, but I said if I want to convert from pixels to rems, for example, I divide it by 16. Well, if I come in here and say 15 and I divide that by 16, I get this. I could put that in there. This right here. I could grab that and put that in like this. Like this. It means the same thing. All right. I just left it in there as pixels. All right. There are, one rem is equal to 16 pixels. Since there's 15 here, I just did it like that. All right. The text decoration, by now you should be familiar, that removes the underline. We want the text color for all of the menu options to be white. All right. And we want the font size to be set a little bit bigger. And we want, again, make sure that's floated right. All right. This is when we hover or put our mouse over it. We want to change the background color, which was black, to white. We want to change the color, which is white, to black. So we're reversing it. And again, you all get this. But if I wanted to, for example, I could put in here yellow and green. I don't know why I would do that, but I could do that if I wanted to. All right. And then when we go back in and we take a look at it, okay. Now, did that make it better? In my opinion, it did not. It did absolutely nothing to make that better. But I'm just saying this is one of those things that you could do. So if you take your time and go back to this once we're finished, those are the kind of things where I think you're going to have your learning moments when you go in and change this. You could dramatically change the look and feel of this by just changing a few colors, sizes, etc. All right. We've got a lot of class equals section in here, so that's this. What the clear both means is if there was any floating that was being done, either a float left or a float right, that just means get rid of it. We want there to be no floating. So clear both is the same thing as saying clear left and clear right, because those are the only ways that you can float. And we put a border around it. It's a fairly faint border. All right, you may or may not agree with that, but everything should have a border around it with this kind of medium gray. It should have padding. By now, this should make sense to you. There is only two numbers here, which means top and bottom should both have 20 pixels worth of padding. Left and right should have no padding whatsoever. And again, if I divide 20 by 16, I get 1.25. So that could have been changed. We could have changed that to 1.25 rem if we wanted to. All right, then we've got a background color in here. The height is, we want it to basically automatically adjust. All right, and that'll make more sense when we start to scale this in just a couple minutes. The overflow hidden means that, I don't know if you've ever heard the old joke, it's not a funny joke, but trying to stuff 10 pounds worth into a 5-pound bag. Well, with the overflow hidden, what you're saying is if you've got too much, typically it's text, but if you've got too much text for the area that you have, hide it. All right, don't show anymore. Now, there's different ways that you can handle overflow. You can basically tell it to show it, which is going to change the size and stuff. You can tell it to put, to put in scroll bars as well, where you can scroll left, right, up, and down. Usually, I just use hidden. All right. Then this is our main header. This changed a lot of stuff, if you remember. All right. We told it to be fixed at the top of the screen. So that position fixed, the left 0 and the top 0 meant where we wanted to put this main header, which again is this. This is position 00 right here. That's what we told it right there. All right. I changed these. I didn't change those back. All right. The height, we wanted it to basically take up 100% and be 100 pixels high. All right. The background color was black. The width, we told it to go all the way across the screen, just so you see this. If I change the height from 100 pixels, for example, let's change it just so you can see what's happening. We change that to 75 and I save. All right, it's looking a little more crunched now. There's not as much area in here. All right, and if you don't know what I mean, notice what's in here. Notice the way that it's set up. And then let's set it back again to 100 pixels. And you notice there's a little more room in there now. All right, this could be adjusted any way that you wanted it to be adjusted. All right, then when we take a look in here also, notice the width. If for some reason we didn't want it to stretch all the way across the screen, notice if I come in here and say 85%. Okay. All right, now there's 15% that's not being, I mean, why would you do that? You could do it if you wanted to put something else there. I can't think of a good reason for doing that, but there may be one that you come up with, all right, that means that it is a very good reason. The z-index we talked about in class. This is, I think, the only thing we gave a z-index to. We're saying that we want this main header, all right, which is, was a crummy name for that, but we're telling it that we want it to be as much always in the foreground as possible. Never put it in the background. And finally, 5 pixels. Remember, this is a shortcut for saying 5 pixels top, 5 pixels right, 5 pixels bottom, 5 pixels left. So it's saying, give me 5 pixels all the way around. Or we could have put it in there as padding dash top 5 pixels, padding dash right 5 pixels, padding dash bottom 5 pixels, and padding dash left 5 pixels. All right. This is just a shortcut. All right. Then we had our hero section. Okay. And we have our text color, which is almost black. We set the font size. All right. This stuff that's in here, we're saying we want text align, etc., and the size for our H1 and the size for our H2. So right here, okay, we've got font size and font size on these two, and we've got a font size there. So if we weren't resetting the font sizes here and here, then it would be 1.5 M's all the way around. We don't want that. Actually, that 1.5 M is only going to be for that paragraph that we put in there that says we want all your dog needs or whatever it was. The background color will be white. We're telling it to center align the text and put 20 pixels of padding all the way around it. That might have been too much. Let's just see if we change that to 10. And what I want you to do is look at it first. Okay. And I'm going to change that from 20 to 10. Sometimes when you do that, you make it worse, and that might be what happens here. All right, so see that? I have nothing there, see? All right, so I do want that back. Maybe I even want more than I put in. So maybe rather than 20 as an example, I want 25 in there, or 30 or more. All right, this is saying for the H1 and the H2, make sure they're center aligned. All right, now what else did we have in here? All right, we've got that paragraph that looks like it's center aligned. Okay, but we could have gone through and done that too if we wanted to. All right, but you can see again, played around with it. Maybe we should have had a picture on one side or the other. So there's different ways that this could have been changed. All right. All right, then we had our container, and almost everything is in a container. All right. So anything that is, you can see the minimum height. You can see there's padding all the way around it. You can see its positioning, and you can see with the margin, no margin top or bottom, and centered left and right. Any image in there, we're telling it to take up as much space as it possibly can. Now, this that may not mean much right now, and when you look at this, if we start to shrink this down, it doesn't look very good. We haven't added any responsiveness to it. All right, we get a little bit, but I don't know about you, but I think that looks pretty crummy when we shrink it way down. We're going to talk about that in just a bit. All right. All right. Our H2 tag that was in there, center it. And again, you may or may not have noticed where it's got text transform. Okay, these about and gallery and services and contact, they're all in uppercase. And it doesn't matter how we key them in ourselves, lowercase, mixed case, or whatever, they're automatically going to be transformed into uppercase. All right. There's a lowercase in there, and I think there's a title case too. Background color, hopefully all this stuff by now is making some sense. Almost everything that we put in there, we had columns set up, telling all that to float left, relative position, give it some padding. The column 1, 100%. Okay, centered. Our text should be center aligned. Column 2, 50%. Column 3, 33.3%. Column 4, 25%. All right. This was that card that we had in there. So again, as you can see, we put a border around it. We put a border radius around it, some padding, color for our background. All right. And center the text. Okay. Hopefully, as we go through this, you're able to go back again. And remember, you can always go back if you want to, and you can comment out anything that's in here by using the comment delimiters and see exactly what happened. All right. That made the first letter bigger. Then we had our form stuff. I don't want to go really over that because that's going to be a later chapter in the book. All right. This played with the button hovering. You may or may not have noticed that, but if I go and take my mouse and put it over that button, kind of hard to see. It's just a little bit lighter when you put your mouse over it like that. All right. Labels, telling them to be left, it says text align left, and I don't know if that worked or didn't work. See, yep, that was the text align left. So before we put those in, they were centered up here. All right. And it's kind of redundant, I think, at least to have your name, your email, etc. But it's okay. Just to show you, you can use both. Here was the height for that message. So basically that was where it put your message in. And here was our footer. All right. So I went over that fairly quickly, but my question to you is there anything that's in there? Is there anything that's in there in the CSS that you need further explanation on? Anybody watching this live? Again, you'll probably get more out of it. I'll post this whole thing out there in a little bit. and just playing with it yourselves. All right. Now, there's two more things that I want to do today. All right. And I'm going to go, what did we have our break last? I'll go till about 5 after 10, and then we'll take a 10-minute break. Now, there's more stuff that I've got in here, and let's see, probably about 50 more lines. We're down here. We're going to add what are called media queries. Oops. And what that will say is, depending on our screen size, different things that we want to do. All right. What does that mean? Again, it's easiest to show you. So let's start putting these things in here. Okay. Now, when you put in a media query, I've always been taught, at least, put them down at the bottom here. All right. And there you could have several of them. In fact, we're going to have more than one. So at media, all, and max width 600 pixels. All right, what this says for media all means you can put in here media screen. You can put in there media print. So if you were going to print it out, and there's a few other ones, but this says no matter what I'm saying is, if my screen size is between 0 pixels and 600 pixels, what do I want to do? All right, well, I'll show you. And this is the easiest way, is to just show you. What I'm going to say is, if I have a 3-column, let's just do these. So if I have a 3-column layout, or if I have a 2-column layout, all right, so if I have either one of those, make the width 100%. Remember what it was set to before. For the 3-column, it was set to 33.3%. For the 2-column, it was set to 50%. Margin auto, and text align center. All right, that's all we put in so far, just that. But I'm going to save this, and I'm going to go back to here. And guess what? It doesn't look a lick different right now, not a bit. But notice when I make this smaller, that looks a little funky. We'll have to fix that, but it's no biggie. Let's look at the stuff we have changed. We didn't change this, so that doesn't look very good. But notice our gallery now. You can see those pictures and how they look a lot better. This was our 2-column, so that is looking better. All right. I mean, should we come back in here and do all of them? Whoops. In other words, should I come in here and do col 4? All right. So file, save all. And now let's look at that 4-column. When we shrink it down. All right, there's those pictures. I think that looks a lot nicer. Our gallery is looking pretty nice. Our about is looking pretty nice. All right. Wherever our about was, it should be, there's our about right there. Now, our services was already column 1, so that already looks okay. What doesn't look good is this. That looks really pretty bad, I think, at least. All right, so we'll have to fix that. This, we could make it smaller if we want to, but what really looks bad is what's up at the top. We've now lost this. In fact, we only have 3 things in here. Until we widen this out, now we have 4, now we have 5. All right, and you can see it's still less than 600 pixels. How do I know that? Because it's only 1 column that these are showing it. But when I go back to full, it goes back to the way it was to begin with. All right. And again, those are all done with what are called media queries. So let's finish this first media query, and then we'll take a break. So again, This, right, what this is saying again is for all types of medium, if the width of my screen is between 0 pixels, which would make sense, and 600 pixels, I want all this to take place. All right, and you might say, well, how can you tell that? We're going to look at that after the break. I'm going to go back to my form. And I'm going to say width 100%. Should make that look at least a little bit nicer. All right. And what else do we want in here? Oh, we'll say in our hero section. All right, we want the color. Might have already been that. I don't know. So oh, and with the H2. All right. I think that's just about it. Now notice that everything that we just did in here, everything is inside of that curly brace and that curly brace. So we've got a bunch of stuff we're doing in here. I don't think I missed anything, but we'll be able to tell very shortly. All right, so when I get that down, I did miss something because that doesn't look very good. All right, so something is goofed up there, but that's okay. This looks pretty good now. The about looks pretty good. All right, our section here looks pretty good. And it's funny, you can see this stuff is still there. All right, but we'll fix it in a moment. And our gallery looks pretty good. Services looks pretty good. Contact looks much better than it did. And we could shrink this down if we wanted to. So we could shrink down the size of the text here. It's looking, at least in my opinion, it's a little bit kind of scrunched together. So for what we could do if we wanted in here was we could say for our footer, why I did that, I don't know. But for our footer in here, and just come in and say something like font size, I don't know, 0.85 rem, something like that. See if they made it better or worse. You know, it's not as quite as pushed together. All right. Now, there's what are called breakpoints in here. And you'll notice when we get to this point right here, now I can see everything that's in here. Okay. And now nothing looks great. Nothing looks terrible. All right. But when I get to that breakpoint, maybe I wanted to go here to 2 wide, for example, if I want it, and 2 wide here. All right. Once it gets really big, it's looking good as far as I can tell. All right. But the only thing that's not looking good in here, and I'm trying to figure out where I did these. Oh, it's because I missed one. Okay. So let's put this in and then we're taking a break. All right. I actually had 2 media queries in here. All right. And I'm really doing them in the order I'm doing them with you right now. So there's the one media query right there. But I had another one, and I'm going to say here, at media, all. And here we're going to say a max width of 760 pixels. Okay. And let me put some space there. There we go. All right. Telling it to automatically adjust its height there. This is what we didn't have before. Now on the logo, no floating. Remember, we had floated the logo to the left, and we don't want to float it anymore. Okay. This is saying that I want a 10 pixel top margin, no left or right or automatically left and right. So center that in a 20 pixel bottom margin. I believe that's what that is. All right, what else do we have in here? Again, it'll be much easier to show you this in about a minute. Again, we want there to be no floating now because this was floating to the right. Just about done, about 10 more lines to type in here. All right. I'm not going to go over much about initial right now, but it says basically it's saying set it to back to the default. Right. Still that. And one more line and we're done. And I think since I set that there, I can get rid of this one. We're going to find out very, very shortly. So file, save all, and let's look at it now. Now, when I shrink this down, I don't like the way that looks. I should make this smaller. But what you'll notice is you can now see everything. Whoop, I lost that. So that goofed up. All right. My about, decent. My pictures, fine. All right. My gallery, fine. Services look okay. All right. And now once I reach a little more, there, you can see how that went over to here. All right. So this is a work in progress. In fact, I look at every website that I've ever created as basically being, whoop, I'd have to change the size on that, as being a work in progress. All right. Because as you can see, when you start moving it around like this and you start changing your size, how you can have massive changes. All right. Now, it is 10:07. I'm going to give you a break literally in 1 minute. When we come back, what I'm going to do is I don't think I did a good job of showing you media queries. So I wrote another little mini program. You're going to get this too. All right. That's going to show you exactly how media queries work. So let me do a file, save again. I'm going to close this and I'm going to very quickly, and I mean very quickly, show you what that looks like. Okay. And that is right here. This is what we'll look at. It's a very small program. All right. So this is how this thing would look on a widescreen. Then you'll notice widescreen. I'm going to comment that out in just a bit. Normal screen and smartphone. So I want to go through that with you. And when we get done with this program, which you'll have, I'll give to you, we're going to go over chapter 8 quickly because this is everything we've been talking about with media queries. It is, I'll tell you what, it's 10:09. Let's just take till 10:20 and we'll see the best we can to wrap this up in about another hour or so. All right. So come back, please, at 10:20. All right, it's 10:20. Let me ask real quick. Can you guys hear me? Because weird stuff is coming out right here. I'm hearing this little echo and stuff. Can you hear me?
I can, yes.
All right, you can probably hear the other stuff too. I don't know what's going on. I checked my internet connection and it said it was fine, but usually when that makes that little kind of weird noise like it's making, it's about to drop the connection. But I
Okay.
don't know what's going on because like I said, it looks like it's just fine. All
At
right.
this point, you sound clear to me.
Okay. All right. If it's only on my end, that's totally fine with me. All right. I'm going to take this function that's in here and I'm going to comment it out for right now. And I want to go over this program that I very quickly showed you right before the break. All right. See, are you sure you want to save all modified documents? That's fine. All right. So let's just take it then from the top here. Now I brought this up. I should have brought it up in probably in code, but I just brought it up here. So let's take a look and see what's in here. All right, here's the file, and there's not much in it. All right, it's called media queries, and we're using a CSS file called MQ for media queries.css, and we're using a JavaScript program called size.js. Don't worry about either one of those for right now. All right. What we have here, and as you can see, are 5 different divs. One is supposed to represent a wide screen. So actually something more than 1200 wide, more than 1200 pixels wide. It could be a TV or something else. All right. Then we've got normal, which is about 1200 or so pixels wide. Then we've got a tablet, which I think is about 960. And then we have a smartphone, which is, I don't know, 540 or something like that. And then we're going to be able to look at something in landscape mode. Now, if I went and did this, if I commented out my CSS file and I commented out my JavaScript file, doing this on purpose. So if they're commented out, all right, and I go in there and I look at this, that's all we've got. Just literally because those are the 5 divs, and what's in here on those 5 divs are just that it's showing that text, that text, that text, that text, and that text. That's it. All right. Now, if I take this out again, now let's take a quick look at the CSS because, and I have this one here so you can hopefully really see what's going on. All right. And this is saying these, I don't want this H1 that's in here. I don't want it to display. What H1? Whoops. Okay, anything that's in here as an H1, I don't want it to show. All right, display none means basically hide it. This is it right here. So notice I'm saying here, if I'm on the screen and my max width is 500 pixels, what that means is that the width of my screen is between 0 pixels and 500. If that's the case, I want the background color of the form, or the screen rather, to be red, and I want it to display this. And what that is that's the word that says smartphone on it. All right. If the size of my screen is between 501 pixels and 763 pixels, I want the background to be blue. And I want the H1 that basically is going to say tablet to show. If my screen size is greater than or equal to 769 pixels, but less than or equal to 1200, that's normal. So the background color for the screen should be green, and it should say normal. If it's anywhere, then notice min width of 1201. So if it's 1201 or more, it should turn black, and it should say widescreen. And this we'll look at in just a moment. This is if we're working with landscape mode. Don't worry about that right now. But what I want you to hopefully understand from this is now if I come back and run this, I don't know if I saved the other one, so let me double check. Save this and this. Okay, so now if I come back and run this, okay, that's widescreen. What does that mean? That means it's 1201 or more pixels. But when I start to cut the size of the screen down, all right, you can already see what's happening. So when I reach right, come on, there, that's 1200 pixels. When I go a little further, there's 1201, there's 1200 right in there. So it's going down to normal. If I keep going, I'll eventually get to 760. There it is. So that's a tablet. If I keep going again, I'll eventually get down to, I think it was 540, 500, I guess. All right, so there's about 502, 501, 500. So you can see how this is changing. All right, now it's very hard for you to see exactly where that's splitting. So what I did was I added a JavaScript function, and I know we haven't talked JavaScript yet. I get it. But I literally got this from online. And I gave you it's from W3 Schools, and I gave you the URL here. So what this is saying is, hey, if I resize my screen, figure out the width, figure out the height, and then display both of them. All right, it doesn't work perfectly, but right here, that's a JavaScript call that you see on line 11. I'm saying when I resize the screen, I want you to call my function. My function is what I just showed you. So it should show me the size. So now with this in here, okay, and if I run this again, notice that when I move it back, all right, and I'm going to refresh, and I'm going to start moving this. And you can see what's happening. It's showing me what my width and my height are. All right. And when I move it some more, it shows me some more. It doesn't really do a good job of keeping up. So that's why I didn't know if I wanted to show it to you like this or not. But notice there is 857. All right. If I keep moving this, eventually it's going to go back and the color is going to change. Just so you can kind of see in here, like I said, what's going on. Now, maybe this was an exercise in futility, but the idea behind this was to show you that what you can do with media queries is you can have at different screen sizes, you can have different things show on screen, not show on screen, etc. All right. So what I want to do here, get rid of that. And I want to come back to our book. All right. And I want to come back to chapter 8. All right. And go through chapter, not real quickly, but hopefully by 11 o'clock or so, get through chapter 8. It's not a long chapter. Now, Tomorrow, I'm going to give you a pretest that again will be based on the regular test. On Thursday, you will take the test, hands-on test 2, which will be only on chapters 4, 5, and 6. Of course, anything in chapters 1 through 3 you should know also. So really 1 to 6. Friday will be a lab. Then on next Monday, I'm going to give you another pretest because by that time we've gone over 7 already and we'll have gone over 8. And then Tuesday of next week, I'm going to give you your next test, which will be on just 7 and 8. And the reason that I'm doing it kind of like that is next week, I want us to get through chapters 9 and 10, probably the hardest 2 chapters in the book, because you're going to learn how to use CSS Grid and you're going to learn how to use Flexbox. And just like we did for this first website, I'm going to build a couple more sites for you that are going to, one will use Flexbox and one will use probably Grid and maybe even some Flexbox. All right, just so you have an idea of what's going on. All right, so chapter 8, which starts on page 251, how to use media queries for responsive web design. The first thing they're going to show in here are what they consider to be the 3 components of responsive web design. We'll get into them in just a moment. All right, then we'll go into how to test because I want to show you something you probably haven't seen before. And then we'll talk about really those 3 components. And those 3 components are going to be fluid design, and media queries are going to be 2 of those 3 components. All right, so we will get into media queries in here. Like I said, not a particularly long chapter. As always, if you have questions, please ask. Simply put, responsive web design means that your website looks nice regardless of the screen size that's being used to look at it. That's the best thing I can tell you. It's also referred to as RWD. The 3 components are shown right here. All right. And what they are you need to have fluid layouts. What that means is when you are figuring out your layout, you will be using percentages as opposed to using pixels. All right. That's fluid layout. Okay. You need scalable images. You already saw that on here where you saw that when we made this smaller, let's make it real small again. All right. You saw the size of those images. Whereas when we made them bigger, you saw how the size of the images changed. All right. Okay. So that's another component of this. And the third component is media queries. All right. It says, although you can use fluid layout to adjust the widths, you can't use them to adjust the appearance of the page. To do that, you need to use media queries. And again, that's what this chapter is all about, are the 3 components of RWD or responsive web design. So here we're showing it how it would look, this bigger one, how it would look on a laptop or desktop. Here's how it would look or could look. All right, maybe on a tablet, maybe on a phone. I don't know. And that's probably a phone. So again, these are the 3 components. And this is the definition of what RWD is. Okay. All right. So it says, how can you test for this? It says you can use the developer tools. We haven't done much with developer tools, so let's look at them. All right, I'm going to go back to what we had here on here. And if I either right mouse click on here and choose inspect, or on my function keys that are at the top of my screen, or at the top of my keyboard, if I hit the F12 function key, no, it's not working now. So let's do it this way. We'll do the inspect. All right. So here's my website. And here, right here, okay, this is what they refer to then in the book as being the Chrome developer tools. Now, a while back, I even gave you a URL. So if you wanted to look, you could take a free course on this. It's about 45 minutes long. If I can stretch this out as much as I want to, as I get this bigger, of course, this gets smaller. All right. If I take my mouse and I put it on different things, I can, basically figure out what's happening in here. This is our old friend from an earlier chapter, the box model. So this is showing the size of whatever it is I'm looking at, how much padding is around that, the border, how much margin is around that, etc. And I can do that, and I can come in here and basically highlight virtually anything I want in here. All right. And go ahead and take a look at it. So how do you know if something actually is? How do you really know if something is responsive? Okay. Well, we've been doing this. Okay. And that's not great. It's okay, but it's not great. So I'm going to show you two more things that you can do if you want to be able to test this. The first is you can take your mouse and you can put it way up on top here. And this thing that's in blue, it says toggle device toolbar. The one next to it says select an element on the page to inspect it. All right, so if I click here, I can go right there, and then I can select that element. All right, I don't want to do that now. I want to click this next one. And what this is trying to show me when I do this is I can look in here and see how this would look on different things. In other words, it'll show me how it'll look on a desktop, on a tablet, on a phone, etc. Now, that's even kind of tough. So there's actually a new browser out that you may or may not be interested in. And I haven't done I've done virtually nothing with it. And I believe it's called Blisk. Of course, you have to type it right. It's Blisk browser. All right. Not Bowser. Browser. All right. And there it is, Blisk browser. All right, it says Chromium-based web browser. So who cares? Well, the thing about it is it literally is set up that you can go and take a look through here, and you can basically set up, you can set up your own custom setup. So you can say, this is what it would look like on an iPhone, this is what it would, etc. And you can put in as many of these as you want to, and you can buzz back and forth between them. All right. So as a web developer, one of your main concerns is going to be responsive web design. In fact, one of the things that they'll talk about at the end of this chapter is mobile first design. Traditionally, rather than mobile first design, people have done desktop first design or laptop first design. That's how we created the site that we just did. The problem is it's much harder to go from a laptop or desktop to a phone than it is to go the other way. So when you do mobile first development, you're actually doing the hardest one first. All right. Okay. Jump back into here. So they give their own ways for testing in here in developer tools. Again, they will show you the same thing that I showed you. All right. And exactly what you can do with that device toolbar. And I just mentioned Blisk, that isn't even in here. All right. Okay. Okay, we talked a little bit about fluid layouts versus fixed layouts. Let's look at the difference on these pictures. If this is fixed, that means this is 960 pixels. And you might say, big deal. It's a real big deal because think about if we put that on a phone, that's going to probably cut it off and show you about that much. right there. Not what you'd want. But if you're working with fluid, you're working with percentages. That basically has been set up so that it'll scale according to whatever you're using to look at, whatever you're using to take a look at the website. All right. So again, we want to build with fluid layout. As it says there, automatically adjust to the screen size. Fixed again, uses absolute measurements, points or pixels, almost always pixels. Fluid uses percentages. All right, we're not talking in here about rems and ems. We're talking in here for layout, we're talking about percentages for a fluid layout. Now they go through this song and dance here, how you can go from one to the other. And yeah, I guess you could say there's math in here, but they do go through how to do it. I'm not going to run through it right now. I figure that you're all smart enough to know that if you say something is 900 pixels wide, and I say what's 90% of that, you can multiply 900 by 90% and get 810 as an example. All right, and that's what they're showing in here. All right, how to use other units of measure with responsive design. Well, again, these are things we have not looked at, but we will. Notice there's VH. All right, if you could imagine that your screen, so you see my screen right here, if you could imagine that it was cut into 100 pieces, each one of those pieces would be 1/100th of the height of the screen. So if I set my view height to 1 VH, this would be very small. It would be 1/100th of the screen. If I set my view height to, as they show here, to 95 VH, it's going to use up 95% of the screen. You can do that with height, where you are cutting that basically here, or you can do that with width, where you're cutting it into pieces this way. All right. There's also a minimum and a maximum. All right. So as it says, the minimum is equal to 1/100th of the height or the width. Okay. And there's a maximum. All right. And as it says, depends on which one is smaller or which one is larger. Okay. Sizing fonts. This is, we've started talking about this, but let's look at it now. All right. So notice they've got font size 100%, which means use all of it you can. Then we've got H1, H2, and H3. I believe I mentioned on maybe the second day of class, I'm saying it again right now. Historically, you should only have one, say that again, historically, you should only have one H1 tag on a page. And that one H1 tag basically should be highlighting kind of the theme of the page, so to speak. All right. Also, by default, H1s are bigger than H2, which is bigger than H3, etc., down to H6. But you can work with the font size property as they show here and make H1s any size you want. If we flip those two lines, H2 tags would now be bigger than H1s. You can do that. There may be a reason to do that. Typically, footer text is a little smaller, as they show right here. All right. And remember, when you work with this stuff, because I think we're going to look at it soon if we haven't already, we'll talk about REMs and we'll talk about EMs. I mentioned those a little bit earlier. All right. Scaling images. Remember, there's three things that we care about here: fluid layout, scaling images, and media queries. All right. So it says, as the width of the fluid design changes, you typically want to change the width of your images as well, also known as scaling them. All right. And it says on the next page, they'll show you how. Quite often, to make an image scalable, this is all you have to do. You set the max width property to 100%. That way, as it says, the image will always be as wide as it can be. So wherever you're putting it, it'll be that wide. All right. It says in general, when you scale an image, you shouldn't make it larger than its native size because it can end up looking funky if you do that. Now, I have shown you this before that as an example, if I go out to Google Images, all right, we've been working with dogs, so let me just say dogs here. And I grab one of these images. So I grab this one and I say save image as. I'm just going to throw it onto my desktop. All right. And we're going to save it right there. And I'm going to call it dog.jpg. All right. And now if I go and look at that image, there it is. If I put my mouse over it, I can see how big it is. It's 275 by 183. So that literally is the size. Now, they're telling you not to make it bigger. I'm saying they're full of it. If you want to make it bigger, you can, but you should always scale it. And you should make it bigger, but not 1,000 by 1,000 or whatever. So if I take this image and right mouse click on it and open it with Paint, I've shown you this before, you click on resize and you want to choose pixels. And again, it's 275 by 183. If I put 600 in here and click, that scaled it, and it scaled it proportionally. That'll work just fine. So if I come in here now and I save that and I close and I bring it up again, you can see the size has changed. What you shouldn't try to ever do is stretch it. All right, what do I mean? It's literally legal for you to go into CSS and change the width or change the height to anything you want. But when you do that, it can end up looking, for lack of better words, really funky. All right. It'll look disproportional if nothing else. All right. So they show an example in here. So again, if you set this thing up as your screen size gets bigger or smaller, okay, this image is going to get bigger or smaller as well. So with the max width of 100%, you can also limit it. Notice max width is 400. So that means no matter what you're using to hold this, it's never going to be wider than 400 pixels. All right. So again, to create a scalable image, remove any height or width that you might have from the HTML for the image, set the max width. Okay. There's also, as it says, there's a min width that you might want to show for small images like logos. I didn't really do much with my logo, but we could have. So next they show you a web page that actually utilizes this stuff. It says here, when you study the CSS for the figure, you'll notice the font size are set to M's. It says, keep in mind that font sizes won't change when the width of the browser changes, so it may not look exactly the way you want it to look. All right. Now, I'm going to tell you my feelings. All right. I think this looks really ugly. First of all, I would have made this is a little darker than this is. I don't like that. Again, this is just me talking here. All right. And there's color in here, but I don't think it flows really well. You may disagree with that. Totally fine. But even here, notice become a member is a little too wide. I like it when everything is on one line. I don't like this. I would have made that home, about, tickets, maybe membership, and about, something like that. It would have looked nicer. It would have flowed nicer. All right. I would have come in and made this the same background color as this because I like that better. Again, this is me talking. All right. But they show you in here, it says this web page uses a fluid layout so that the widths and the elements change as the width of the browser changes. So we are in chapter 8. You already know this, or you should, but if I come back here, mine's on my C drive. I'm looking for my 5th edition. I don't have it. Hopefully the 4th edition is the same, but we'll find out right now. All right, so this is figures 8-8. All right, of course it isn't that one or that one. All right, so when we start looking at this stuff, again, you'll notice that as we go in there, you can see the size of the picture is changing. All right, it is scaling. Okay, as an example. All right. I don't know what this one is showing. I think it's it's the slick nav thing that we'll look at the end. All right. But if I go back over here to book apps, I think that's what it's under. And I go to chapter 8. All right. Here's the fluid one. I think this is the one we were looking at. There. All right. So you can see what it looks like here. The reason I'm showing you this, I'm not trying to waste my time. I'm not trying to waste your time. But when you are taking your test next week on chapters 7 and 8, if you get confused or forget how to do something, this might help. You can see we've also added in here a couple of other things, such as, again, there is some shadowing here. There is a gradient here as well. All right. As it says, when this page is displayed on a mobile device, the text may be reduced and become so small it's hard to read. All right. Maybe you've gone through that on certain websites on your phone. I know I have. There are certain things that you should be thinking about if you know that you're going to want to create an application that maybe more people are going to look at it on a phone, maybe for a restaurant or something like that. Things like you want to make sure your buttons are big enough. Some people have fat fingers, literally fat or thick fingers. So it's hard for them to press buttons. So you make them bigger. All right. You might want to give them away. You might want to turn pinching on or off so they can make things bigger like text. All right. So they show you the HTML for the page. There's not actually nothing in there that we haven't already talked about. All right. They are setting up a nice aside in here and they have an article so you can look at those. And then they show you the CSS. And again, what's in here that's yellow, well, those are just comments. All right. But you'll notice that when we come in here and someplace in here, all right, they're working with images. And they do a nice job in here of telling you exactly how big something is going to be. All right. All right, so the last part of the chapter then talks about media queries. I will tell you, because we're going to look very quickly at this in just a moment, that when you do the exercises at the end of chapter 8, you might find them to be a little bit confusing because we're going to be using this thing that's called slick nav. What is slick nav? Well, let's see if it's on the one that I showed you a minute ago or not. No. Maybe you've seen this on a website when you're looking at it on your phone or whatever, and you don't, all of a sudden, all of your menu items go away and they're replaced either up here or down here with what's called a hamburger menu. It looks like a square with 3 lines through it. And when you click on the hamburger menu, it shows you the regular menu. All right. That's what this slick nav thing is going to allow you to do in this chapter. Are there other ways of doing it? Yes. But for where we are right now, that's the one the authors have figured would be the best for them to use. All right. Let me close a few of these things here. All right. So it says in the topics that follow, you learn how to use media queries. I don't want to sit and stumble through this and spend a minute or 2 minutes on it, but what I tried to show you again in that program that I put out there that had the different screen sizes was what media queries are all about. Between that and the ones that I wrote in our website, I'm hoping you at least are walking into this with your eyes wide open as far as what this is. All right. So it says when you develop a responsive website, you need to make sure to configure the viewport for mobile devices. And how do you do that? You've already seen this. All right. Now we've looked at this line already. I really should put that line in. In fact, I will add this line. All right, before I go back and put the latest version of our single page website out on before I put it out on GitHub. But look at what's in there. Meta, name equal viewport. Viewport is whatever you are using to look at the page. All right. Width, it says width equals device dash width. All right. And again, what they're saying is the width is going to be the device, whatever I'm using, its maximum width. And that initial scale, as it says, it indicates that the initial zoom factors needed to display the page. So show it at 100%. You can see when you look in here, these are all things that you can set. So this width that's right here is this width. All right. It says you can also use the device width keyword to indicate that it should be the width of the screen in CSS pixels scaled to 100%. All right. We don't have anything in here for height, but we could do that as well. Now, sometimes you do want to limit the minimum or maximum for scaling. All right. And again, when we say zoom factor, I mean, can they pinch in or pinch out, all right, to make bigger or make smaller? And you have some control over that. I mean, if you are setting up a if you're writing some kind of an app where you're going to have a game you can play on a phone, you might want to set a minimum scale. If it's too small and they're playing it on their phone, they might not even be able to see what it is they're trying to work with. Same thing with maximum scale, but in the other direction. All right. So as far as how to code these, this is what I showed you before. At media, all right, and then the type, okay, and you can put as many of these things in here as you want. All right. Now, just so you know, in the example that I showed you here, for example, let's look at this one. Right there. Okay. Here is an and. So this says greater than or equal to 501 and less than or equal to 768. This one only has one. So this one says greater than or equal to 1201. I didn't show you that landscape thing on here. It does work. But if you want to go in and change your type, change your orientation to landscape, that'll come out as orange. All right. But what I'm trying to get across here is at media. All right. This is only for the screen in this case. Okay. And we could have rewritten this as and min width, we could have set the 1 pixel and max width 500, for example. But this will handle everything between technically 0 and 500 or 1 and 500. All right. So these are the different things that you can set here when you are writing a media query. I showed you the ones you're going to use most of the time. All right. Which are really max width and min width. But there's other things, and they give you quite a few different examples in here as well. All right. Make sure you put the add media, not the test you'll take this week, but the one you'll take next week. You will have to write some media queries. Now, this is a very important, this third bullet right here. It says the screen size at which a media query is used to change the appearance of a page is referred to as a breakpoint. Now, I manually set the breakpoints in the example, all the examples that I gave you. But when we get in, and for example, in a few weeks, when we talk about Bootstrap, Bootstrap has just natural breakpoints, and it'll make more sense, hopefully, even then than it does right now. All right. How to determine breakpoints? Okay. And what'll happen is kind of what I did. And that is, I did maybe use F12, but if you remember when I ran mine before, all right, and let's get rid of this for now. But I mean, I ran it and I came in and I said, okay, well, that looks pretty bad right here. I'm missing this. Okay, that could be a breakpoint. So you just come through here and you go in and you start looking at your height and your width. Guess what? You know how to do that now because I gave you that very simple little JavaScript function right here, where you can at any time print out your window width or your window height. Now, the last part of the chapter here talks about this Slick Nav plugin. All right, as it says, when you develop a responsive design, you need to provide menus that work for mobile devices. So in other words, if we had 5 things like this, it might be on a phone too wide to go across, and even putting it in a couple rows might look really funky. So if you use Slick Nav, the plugin, this is what you're going to get. Once you click this, this is called a hamburger menu. Okay. And sometimes, usually it doesn't even have the word menu on it. It just has these 3 bars. When you click on it, it'll actually show you your menu. Now, I believe for one of the exercises, you have to use the SlickNav plugin. So you may want to dog ear or somehow annotate page 279 in the chapter because you'll have to know the HTML for setting it up. All right. Finally, they go and they try to show this page that's truly responsive. There it is. And again, you can see, again, probably laptop or desktop, possibly a tablet, and a phone, and how it's supposed to look nice on any of these. As it says, they are adhering to everything that they've asked us to do for responsive website design. It has fluid layout, it has scalable images, and it has media queries. All right, it says the only change here is that Slick Nav menu. And again, that's what gives you this right here and right here. All right. So they give you the CSS for this. Sometimes it almost makes more sense to read the comments to see if what is shown below makes sense. But you can see they've written media queries here. Finally, they give you the CSS that goes along with it as well. All right. And that's it. Now, we're almost finished, but before we do, I just want to mention one more thing. And that is when I come back here, this is not your class, this is my other class. All right. So right now, we already went over 4, 5, and 6. We looked at those exercises the other day. So I want to quickly look at 7 and 8. Those exercises won't be due. The one for Halloween 7 and Halloween 8, Shape Up 7 and Shape Up 8 will not be due until a week from this Sunday, which I believe is like February 5th. Yeah. So these 2 that we'll look at very quickly won't be due till February 5th. All right. So we're adding 2 navigation menus in here. This is level 1. These down here are level 2. We already talked about this in chapter 7. What that's going to be is an unordered list inside of an unordered list. So the one unordered list will have in there for list items, home, product list, personal, decorating ideas, and join email. Then underneath the list item for decorating ideas will be another unordered list with outdoor, indoor, table, and treats. All right. And they explain some of that I just said. Format the links. So what are these? These are hyperlinks that they made look like buttons. All right. Not hard to do with CSS. All right. Then modify the image in the main content so that the link displays the same page as the link below it. What does that mean? That means that if you come in here and you choose, I think it means if you choose this, you're going to get this. All right. Then finally in chapter 8, what we just covered, this will be responsive. So it should look nice as you scale down the size, the width really of your screen. All right. Notice what they say in here. This is what I want you to do. I mentioned this the other day. I don't want you to use the same, like put everything that you did for chapter 3. Don't make a new folder and then just do it for chapter 4 and just replace it. Don't do that. Have a chapter 3 folder, have a chapter 4 folder. When you get done with the chapter 3, copy the whole folder contents over to chapter 4. When you get done with 4, copy them all over to chapter 5, etc. All right. So that's it for that one. All right, that'll be what we're getting to starting next week. And then finally for Shape Up, very similar. All right. So again, for 7, we looked at this a little. Again, another navigation menu. Very similar to the way the other one is set up. And then finally in chapter 8, make it responsive. And like I said, one of these has you use, I'm pretty sure that's Slick Nav. All right, there it is. All right. So unless anybody has any other questions, tomorrow I will send you by 7 a.m. I will send you out a copy of the pretest. From 8:05 till approximately 8:15, I will go over that pretest. From 8:15 until 9:30, you will be able to work on the pretest. And from 9:30 till 10:15 or so, I'll do the pretest in front of you. Then on Thursday, you will do the actual hands-on test for chapters 4 through 6. Does anybody listening live have any questions on anything that we've gone over today? Anything?
Not at the moment, no.
Okay. All right. Well, if you don't, I will see you tomorrow. Like I said, 8:05 to 8:15. And as I did last time, I'll just leave the thing going. And the other thing I want to do tomorrow, I'm glad I just thought of this myself. Tomorrow, and this will be this is a one-time only thing. All right. If you have not done the written tests for chapters 1, 2, or 3, I'm going to go over those tomorrow. It'll be a separate lecture. It'll be private. So I will send you a link to that URL. All right. And the way I'm grading these is if you basically got most of them right, you're going to get 10 out of 10, even if it wasn't 100%. All right. So I want to make sure I do that tomorrow. So Grant, maybe you can remind me otherwise that to go over that tomorrow. All right. So I will see you tomorrow at 8:05. Have a good day.
Thanks, you too.